And now onto some disturbing news out of Lincoln, Nebraska, where a Walter Haddock was hospitalized yesterday in a severe case of accidental autoasphyxiation. According to Haddock's roommate, Haddock accidentally came close to killing himself yesterday evening when he was so startled by his cat that he, quote, forgot to release a breath he didn't realize he was holding. After forgetting to breathe for over a minute, Haddock collapsed to the floor where he remained unconscious for some time before his roommate, Adrian Fisher, eventually found him. When we spoke to Fisher about the accident, he was quick to explain to us that this was in fact not the first time this had almost happened.
Yeah, no, I always knew there was something iffy about him. People don't just forget to breathe, that's not how the human brain works. But this guy, sometimes I just walk into the room and he'd be sitting there going all blue in the face, not breathing, and I'd snap him out of it and I'd be like, what was all that about? And he'd always say the same thing. He'd say, I just forgot to release a breath. I didn't realize I was holding.
However, experts at Bryan Medical Center, where Haddock was hospitalized, explained that Haddock's condition is, in fact, not as unusual as people think.
Yeah, people do forget to breathe. It's a thing that happens. A case this severe is obviously extremely rare, but it's not like the idea of forgetting to release a breath you didn't realize you were holding is inherently nonsensical, and I think more people need to realize that.
Fisher, though, remains unconvinced.
And mind you, this wasn't the only way he was different from normal folks. He'd always be nodding too much for one thing and blinking too much for another, as if there was like somebody standing in front of him shining a flashlight into his eyes, and he had all these nervous tics. Like he'd always be shifting his weight around and cocking his head and sighing too much and just moving his arms around so much you'd think it was one of them flappy-armed car dealership tube men. And mind you, I wouldn't mind any of this except that it gets old after a little while, I wish he'd break it up a little. I wish he'd try out new mannerisms, new ways of interacting with people. It gets a little stale. It gets a little boring.
When questioned about these other mannerisms, however, Haddock's doctor rebutted that all of them are, quote, perfectly normal things that all human beings do.
I really don't want people to read anything too unusual into this case. People blink, people shift their weight, people make grunting noises. It's all normal stuff that people do. The only thing really unusual about Haddock is that apparently he felt the need to put all these mannerisms into words and explain to people at all times what he was doing using this exact same diction, which is admittedly strange, but hey, maybe he was just a writer.
Fortunately, Haddock is already well on the road to recovery. When he woke up in the hospital earlier this morning, he described his experience as follows, quote, it was like I was hit over the head by a brick and then suddenly everything went black. He then proceeded to use a number of other literary cliches to describe the feeling of unconsciousness, and then narrated a lengthy dream sequence in which he met with an old mentor of his who died a few years ago. From Generic News Network, I'm Dan Butler.